The Spin-Off Podcast Network. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today.
The Fold is brought to you by O Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Nau mai, hoki mai, kia The Fold, e mihi nei, ko Duncan Greive tōku ingoa. My guest today is Madeleine Sami, maybe biggest star we've had on the show. Certainly up there. Just like a phenomenally talented slashy of actor, director, writer, just a person who is just a highly creative and very original force in the kind of New Zealand culture. Someone who, she's basically the same age as me, and so I kind of feel like I know some of what the kind of ride she's had through New Zealand, and a lot of the kind of institutions that kind of forged her, and that's what we talk about quite a bit in this podcast. Is like she came up through what was Silo is now Basement theatre. Saw her there out last night. Went to the same show. We talk a bit about that scene, which I've talked about a bunch on this podcast, because I think, like, you know, for a lot of New Zealand, you see people like Taika and Rose, Madeleine, and, you know, unless you're like really in this thing, you see them kind of just when they sort of pop out into the culture, and I'm really, really, you know, and they're there on merit and on their own steam, and yet it's also these kind of institutions and pipes that are so crucial to making them. And that's why I love The Basement, because you can see it at its most kind of nascent form when these kind of new people are being birthed. And the fact that people like Madeleine and a lot of the kind of comics and actors and writers just continue to frequent that and kind of be nourished by and nourish these kind of generations as they come through. I think that's such a kind of crucial thing for us to understand and fight not to lose, because every so often it does feel like they're under strain. So we talk about that. We talk about Super City, how that was made, and there's something in what she says about the duration that she had to put that thing together with Tom Sainsbury from a writing perspective that I don't know happens often enough with our TV products, and that might well be why that thing is just so pin sharp even today, and just kind of unimaginable to be made for multiple reasons. And then we talk about two shows which she's got dropping within weeks of each other. Deadlock, which is a very big budget. I don't know what the budget is, but it looks big. Sort of hour-long, real original weird show that's been made for Amazon Prime. Madeleine's in one of the key roles, and it's a kind of, you know, you could cut a trailer for it, which is like, this is a noirish murder mystery set in a remote rural town. We've all seen a bunch of those. They're great. This is that. It's also something else as well. It's a very Madeleine Sami weird production. And yeah, that's coming out in a few weeks. And then I think maybe almost exactly the same time, there's Double Parked, which is a way low, you know, again, assuming, I don't know the budget, but it feels lower. A New Zealand show, Alice Ned and Chris Parker, co-creators, with Madeleine Sami and Kora Forrester in sort of both starring and with writing or directing input as well. And it's, you know, it's just much more intimate, but it has that kind of crackle of improvisation and the actors being allowed to get weird and kind of riff and move that you know, differentiates it from some New Zealand comedies, and certainly from that kind of that strand of the more sort of format shows which have really dominated comedy here lately. So that's basically the shape of the conversation. Madeleine's a real treasure, real thoughtful, really open, and we end by talking a bit about the writers' strike and user-generated content and that whole soup. And she's got like a really nicely optimistic and a pretty well-argued point on that as well. So, yeah, this is a real fun one. It's Madeleine Sami on The Fold. Kia ora, Madeleine, and welcome to The Fold.
Kia ora, it's nice to be here.
So we were just talking before that we sort of walked past one another last night at the Basement, which is maybe my favourite venue to see anything in Auckland. Both went to the same show, Liv Parker, who just killed. But I just wondered if you could kind of talk a little bit about that live space, which is kind of where you began, and what keeps you returning there, both as a sort of an audience member and a participant in an institution like the Comedy Festival.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of like a spiritual theatre home for me. So when it used to be the Silo Theatre, when I was like a little 17, I would have said 17, 18-year-old, and I was fresh out of high school, and I did a play called Three People at the Cinema, which was like a devised piece of work, which was probably the first thing I did out of high school. And it was all improv, but there was no talking, and it was like cinema seats. And it was myself and two other actors, and it was just like kind of, I don't know, maybe it's like in my memory, it's like Mr. Bean-esque kind of physical comedy. And then, of course, the plays Bear and Number Two, which then kind of, brought me onto the kind of scene, the theatre scene in Auckland. But yeah, I've spent many an hour in that place, and it does have a magic about it. It has retained this sort of underground kind of safe space for people to experiment and make crazy stuff, and like it still has that energy about it, and it still feels exciting to go and see shows there. And I think back in the day it was just the bottom space, but now we've got the upstairs, which is of course where we saw Liv yesterday, and it just feels like an exciting vibe. It feels like that's where the new stuff, the cool stuff is happening. Yeah.
And I guess that you sort of touched on it there, but I kind of wanted to get a sense from someone who has, like you say, been through that process and come to the pretty extraordinary position you are now. How do you sort of view the kind of health of it? Because there is that beautiful thing where there is like both a community and a sense of competition. Like everyone, if you see a show and you're a comic or in the industry and it feels like a vault or it's in a new direction, it kind of, you can sort of sense the way it starts to kind of crackle through the room and the community more broadly.
Yeah, I think it just feels like, and you see someone like Liv last night and you're like, oh, that's the next generation, and we're all a bunch of oldies in the crowd going, here we go. There's like, I think, it definitely is that sort of, it's competitive, but for more than anything, it's supportive and it's just inspiring. It's like, I guess there's just a lot of people doing cool stuff, and, you kind of go along and you're just inspired to kind of keep on going. And yeah, it feels like it's such a workable space as well. It feels like you can kind of go in there and take any gear and go into that black box space, that classic black box, and create something out of nothing, And I think that's what keeps people going back to a space like that, because it feels like, you can kind of go in there with an idea and even not really a plan and come out with a show. And that's why I feel like it constantly kind of breeds this kind of, type of performer in New Zealand, where we're just kind of pushing the envelope and trying new things and, encouraging each other to kind of be weirder and more interesting. And, I think that transfers through into other spaces, like when those people get older and they move on and they take that into like TV, or, like inevitably have to, pay the rent a bit more, but at least when you're a bit younger and you're a bit keen, you can kind of go in there and go crazy. Do
you want to talk a bit about how those things are made? Because you've directed a show, I think it was Rosa's show, I think played at Basement, and there is that kind of, there's the theatre community and the comedy community there, and they sort of seem to feed off one another in the sense that there are these sort of processes that forge and improve the shows, and that seems like quite a beautiful kind of creative environment that isn't necessarily common to some of the more solitary creative arts that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I grew up, the kind of generation I grew up in, like the first time I did number two, the play at Silo Theatre was part of this New Works festival that was commissioned. So there was like myself, there was a crew that included like Brett McKenzie, Joe Randerson, Jackie Van Beek. They did a devised play, like, for a couple of weeks after I did number two. And, there's always been this like spirit of devising around that space. And yeah, I think the comedy thing kind of came in a bit later. It used to be kind of more of a theatre space. But I think when those kind of worlds collide, they inevitably kind of influence each other. So like, directing Rose in Finally Dead, which, I love that show, and I keep telling her like she needs to like do a special or something, because it's such a weird little show, and there are so many kind of meta aspects, and there's so many kind of theatrical things in that show. It's quite different from her other stand-up, I think. But obviously she kind of got me on board because I do have a bit more of that sort of brain. But yeah, I think it's nice that there's a space where those kind of things can influence each other. And like I said before, it is like a kind of a space where people can kind of push each other's boundaries in terms of like how strange you could make something, or how interesting, or like what you can do with really very few resources. For me, when I did number two back there in 1998 or 9, we had no resources. We had a chair, and I had to play all the characters, and I had to do that with my body and my voice, and then I toured that show forever, and that's kind of I've been doing characters before that, but that sort of solidified my I guess my my thing really, and playing lots of characters and being able to kind of shift in and out. That was kind of a really succinct kind of version of what I've continued to do now in film and TV and stuff like that. So yeah.
That's quite an interesting way of sort of segueing into the kind of next piece, because sometimes I feel like I went to 3 shows last night and kind of still feel like I'm in serotonin deficit from just too much laughing. Yeah, face hurts and just like a little bit kind of low. I gave up too much.
Oh, no, you're depressed.
Yeah,
Post-show depression.
It's a real thing. But the thinking about like that kind of process of really sweating and encouraging the leaning into the weird and allowing people to be really vulnerable, like when you move into making for television, and there's a common kind of critique you sometimes hear from people that shows don't get to develop in the same way and with that same kind of respect for how fragile they are when the idea is small, as some of those kind of live productions do. And because I, as a person who's been a critic at various, like a working critic, have felt like there is a gap between the extraordinary talent that exists in those spaces and the work that sometimes gets onto the screen. As someone who's been through those processes, do you think that development space is right, or at the moment?
Like in terms of like there's not enough development in TV, or there's not enough time given.
Yeah, exactly. Like how you take it from an idea to the screen. Like, does it get that same opportunity to kind of gently evolve?
It definitely doesn't. And you kind of have to adapt to the way like a TV making process works. But like back in the day when we did Super City, Tom and I, and so this has changed a lot even in the television industry. I felt like we had months and months to write together, and we were learning to write TV together. We were going online and looking at like how like a third act structure works, and like what you need to do before you get to the ad break and stuff like that, which has all changed now with streaming anyway. That whole sort of thing, the whole thing has evolved so much. But we did get more time back in the day. I think now, what I find in the stuff that I do is that I still take all of that stuff that I've learned from my days in theatre into what I do now. So like, for example, with Jackie and I, when we made the Breaker Operas, we worked on that screenplay on and off for like, a long time, and we put it through many of the processes we'd put a play through, devising a play through. We'd do workshops with it. We'd stand it up. We did a workshop where we just had comedians to just put jokes in and help us with jokes. We did read throughs. We did we rewrote the whole thing with another writer for fun. And then when we got to shoot it, we deliberately cast people that we knew were good improvisers because we wanted to keep that spirit alive of the thing, which is how we'd both go about devising a play. And that's the kind of, world we grew up in. And, people like Taika, they do that. We all kind of came from that same sort of theatre world of devising things and keeping things alive. So it's sort of that, I guess, in terms of the creative process, it's about never forgetting that stuff that, it's about merging, I guess, those two processes for us, and a lot of the time when I'm pitching on a project to direct or whatever, and people are like, what is your style? And I'm like, well, I come from a theatre background is often what I lead with, because for me, that says a lot about how I want to approach the work and how much, I'm an actor. I like actors to feel powerful in their parts. Sometimes actors go into like a TV show or that kind of, more corporate world or more rigid kind of world of making TV, and they're told what to do and where to stand and stuff. And that's never how I've wanted to approach work, because I don't feel like it creates the best results. And, I feel like the best shows are when that chemistry and that camaraderie and all that play is like there on the surface. And that definitely comes from a background in theatre. So I think the key is you're never going to be able to the process of making TV is what it is, or films, it is what it is. If you're able to get the budget to spend the time, that would be amazing. But oftentimes you don't. So you kind of have to compromise and then work out, how you can still maintain those things and keep those things with you that you've learnt from the past that make the work better, and then also get it shot on time.
So you touched on it at the start of that, but I recently just in prep for this rewatched that first episode of Super City, and it's still this kind of electrifying, kind of chaotic, really brave, original piece of television. Do you how do you kind of relate to that show now, and what are the kind of what was it about that kind of special group, different kind of generations and backgrounds that kind of coalesced into making something pretty kind of rare and special in the New Zealand context?
I mean, I think I was kind of quite obsessed with deluded people, and culturally for me, I'm mixed race, and I've always, at that time especially, I think I was questioning a lot of that, and I especially with a character like Pasha from Super City season 1, who is just, so familiar is kind of like an enhanced version of probably what was going on for me, a character who is so obviously not white, but trying so hard to be and get along in that world. And so for me, it was, looking back now, I think we got to be quite punk in terms of getting to make a network television show where we had, a rough sleeping character who finds a baby. I just don't feel like that stuff gets to get made. So I feel really privileged that we got to kind of push the boat out a bit. And, Tom and I really did learn how to write TV on making that show. And, we got Taika directed it. And so we were this kind of we got to really experiment a lot with that. And, in terms of the writing, I think identity is such a massive part of that first season of that show, and the comedic, kind of comedic and dark ways people kind of where they find their family, or where they feel how they feel most at home in themselves, and where that takes them, or the kind of exploring the delusion of that and the fun and the kind of darkness of that stuff. So yeah, I feel like it was really fun to kind of be able to just go, what are the kind of characters I could play that I haven't seen, and how do we explore this kind of notion of what an Aucklander is, and that sort of thing. So it was a lot of fun. It's all a bit of a blur. It was, I feel like I was making up for not getting cast in a lot of my high school plays by casting myself as the 5 leads, and then I was just like, the actual practicality of shooting it, I was like, this is a nightmare. I was so tired. So a lot of it's like amnesia for the process, but it was a lot of really good learning for Tom and I as well, just like learning how to write and getting to kind of do that thing that I'd done in theatre for many years on screen. And that Katerina Denave, who had seen me do my plays for years, was the one that kind of pushed me to put that on to TV. So I'll always be grateful to her vision for that.
I'd really love to sort of drill into some of that, but I'm conscious that we're sort of running out of time a bit. And I do want to talk about the 2 shows that you're, it's kind of wild to be dropping these 2 like very different but really kind of rich shows at the same time. Next month,
I'll be so sick of my face by the end of this month. I'll just be like, get her off my screen.
Yeah, it's really your Eras tour. So tell me about Deadlock to start with. Like everything from the showrunners to the duration to like the tonal range to the way that your character kind of looks and behaves feels really original and like a move on from it kind of has some of the tropes of the kind of dark crime thing in terms of its look, but it's also just super odd. Just to tell us what drew you to that project.
Well, I've been a fan and friend of the Kates for a long time. They actually, we had a Skype back in the days when you used Skype. They asked me to direct Get Crackin', like many, many years ago. And we had a Skype about it, and I was keen. I'd seen the catering show, and I just thought that was so funny, and I felt like our comedic sort of flavor was very similar. And we had the Skype. I was just like, I love these women. And then we got production funding for Breaker Opera, so the timing didn't work out. And then I stayed friends with them over the years and kind of became friends with them online and had a cameo in Get Crackin'. And then in 2021, they kind of approached me to do some writing for Deadlock. And I had a bunch of writing projects at the time, but I was like, I need to work with these women. I love them. They are my friends now. I want to work on anything with them. And it was like, I don't think at that point I knew it was like an Amazon show even. I just was like, I want to write with them. This sounds like really, it sounds like a really ambitious project, and I was keen. So I started on board as a writer, and this is all in the pandemic. So we're in virtual writers' rooms. It's all very strange. I think with the restrictions in Melbourne, the Kates couldn't even get into a room together. So we're all sort of writing. And at this point, I've known them for like 4 or 5 years, and I've never met them. And then kind of got through that process, and then got asked to audition, which I thought was a joke. I thought they were pranking me. Because I'd written on this thing, and I didn't think of myself in this part at all. I had an idea of this person in my head from writing it. It wasn't me. And I auditioned for both leads. Really focused more on Dulcie, the Kate Box character. Yeah. And then got the Eddie part, which, is probably one of my favorite characters I've ever played, to be honest, because she's just nothing you've really ever seen a woman do on screen before, get to be that really brash, kind of quite aggressive, sort of, initially anyway, probably unlikable kind of rough gal. And they really let me play with that as well. And yeah, it was just, I think the Kates are geniuses. Like they're so subversive, and they really wanted to take this genre and like upend a bunch of the tropes. And I think they've done a really good job of that. And they've managed to kind of keep the humor in there, but also like the crime story is really compelling too. So it does feel like something really original, and it feels really exciting to be part of something that's going for something, that's going for something different and not just coasting along and trying to be the same as everything else.
The Fold is brought to you by O Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa, with over 4,000 out-of-home advertising sites nationwide across both street furniture and retail centres. I'm super grateful to O Media for enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
Talo for Lover. I'm Madeleine Chapman, editor at The Spinoff. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spinoff member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
And then the other project that you're working on is a group of, it's double parked, Alice Sneddon and Chris Parker kind of creators and a group that have sort of come up together, maybe a generation back from you, but certainly who have gone through the same institutions and processes that you have. What's sort of different about working with people that you have that sort of long relationship with and then the kind of shared, kind of cultural experience with in a lot of ways?
Yeah, I mean, Double Parked is like, so I've worked with Alice and Chris since Funny Girls days. So that's sort of going back like 8 years ago, like when I was working with Rose and those guys. And so I've known them for years. There's a shared kind of, again, sense of humor and history there. My DOP on Double Parked, Paul, started out as a camera like assist or something on Funny Girls. My wardrobe designer, costume designer, Sasha, was Funny Girls, I think, was her first costume designing job. And so now we've all been involved with shows with each other, developing, and this is a big props to Bronwyn, who used to, who was the producer on Funny Girls, and John on Ben, who has just in the background been giving comedic actors like the opportunity to develop as comedy writers, as TV writers. She deserves a lot of credit for doing that quietly in the background. So we've all known each other for years. And there's this like shorthand, I think, that comes with just knowing people and knowing, and I was directing and acting Double Parked. So, and Chris was there every day, and we had a 6-week shoot. We had floods, we had cyclones. It was a very intense, classic low budget New Zealand kind of TV shooting experience. But because of that shorthand between all of the creatives, it just felt very easy and very natural, and we all felt like we're on the same wave. And I remember at one point, just like, I don't even feel like I needed to have much of a costume meeting with Sasha, because she just knew instinctively what we would be after. Never had to sort of say. So it was a treat to kind of be able to make a show with friends, basically. And Antonia Preble was one of my dearest old friends, and we've never really worked together before, but we've been friends. So this was our first time kind of acting opposite each other, and that was amazing because she's incredible. So it was fun to kind of act, and the same with Kate Box on Deadlock. Like, just you're working with a powerhouse, and it's like they help you bring your A game. So yeah, and like vastly different shows, but like, yeah, just really nice to make it. It felt like a real family making Double Parked.
So lastly, I wanted to sort of touch briefly on the writers' strike, which is obviously kind of very present in the imagination of the worlds that you come from and some of the worlds that you operate in at the moment.
You're not asking me about AI. It's freaking me
out. I'm not. I do a lot of AI chat on this podcast, but I'll keep it away from this one. I was more thinking about what the big different dynamic to me since the last writer strike in the 2000s is not actually AI. It's the rise of user-generated content and YouTube and TikTok particularly as sort of alternate valves for people's attention. And one of the fears that I have as someone who loves the kind of craft of that sort of the more traditional or kind of staged approach to making things that we've been talking about this whole time. And I sort of wondered, and whether the absence of it will actually just kind of further accelerate those long-term trends into UGC and this kind of more. Because ultimately we were talking about, and you came up in the monoculture, and at a time when there were few spots, but you kind of could grab a large attention, and the whole engine of the thing was that. I just wondered what your kind of relationship was with the likes of YouTube and TikTok, and whether you see them as challenging the kind of those worlds of television and film, or whether you view them as kind of distinct and complementary.
I think I'm on I don't really know. I don't get involved in a lot of it. I can get lost on TikTok just kind of watching stuff. It feels pretty harmless to me. I'm constantly, he's like, this is such a dad thing. I'm going to totally reveal this, but Taika sends me TikToks all the time. And I'm like, you're such a dad now. He's like, look at this funny video. But like, I think there is like, I think it is, I mean, jury's out really, because it's so sort of new to me. But like, I feel like it is complimentary. I feel like, there was this, there's people what I like about TikTok is there's often just kind of like people doing something weird that then catches on and becomes a trend, and then that becomes kind of influential to the culture. Like, I don't know what this style is called, but the Starbucks girl who does those kind of weird, surreal Starbucks videos and I'm just like, that's kind of weird, very interesting to me. And like, who would have got to make a show like that in this day and age with that sort of style of whatever that's called, like surreal nightmare dream video, whatever it's called. I don't know. I just feel like there's a place for it for sure. I mean, you'd hope that we wouldn't lose, that it wouldn't be like a case of one or the other, that we wouldn't lose. And I feel like people just shift, like it's cycles, like how in music, there was like, it's a singles based kind of culture, but then there's a whole movement of like, like all my friends, teenagers are buying vinyl and listening to vinyl and getting really excited about vinyl again. And so they're listening to music and thinking about music in a really different way. And then I remember someone saying, we got this, because I got a lot of musician friends being like, it's such a single base. It's so hard to kind of like, what's the point of making a record, da, 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 da. And I was like, that's not new. Like in the 50s, it was 60s, it was like a really singles based thing. So I think we just go through cycles and like things kind of pop up and come down. And not sure about the longevity of like these kind of short attention span type video apps, short attention span video apps. I mean, maybe we've just all got ADHD now and that's all we can handle. And I think after the pandemic and everything the world's been through, we do need a little light entertainment. And I think something like TikTok can be that, but then we all like lock into Succession once a week and we all like wait. So I don't know. I feel like both can coexist, and I feel like both have like pros and cons. And yeah, I'm open to it, Duncan. I'm not mad. I'm not mad about it.
Honestly, I think that's such a beautifully optimistic take, which, and
I'm more scared of AI. Let's not talk about it. I'm more scared of AI taking my image and being like, oh, season 2 of any show that I'm done, they've already bought it. It was in my contract. I didn't sign off on it, but they have my image and I'm done.
It's like Seinfeld vision from 30 Rock, They just drop you into Sami vision in every show. Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for this. It's been such a fascinating insight into the way that you kind of operate in these different worlds, and why you've just continuing to be the busiest person in New Zealand show business. It's a joy to watch.
Thanks, mate.
That was The Fold, brought to you by our partners at oOh!media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Huge thanks to oOh!media for sponsoring this episode of The Fold and enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spinoff. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spinoff member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spinoff Podcast Network.